Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of To The Point podcast. We guys all had a great weekend. A lot happening in the world of sports. The NHL is in full force. Most teams getting to that 30 game mark with 26 games to go. A lot still to be decided, and the standings continue to get closer and closer day by day. We had an excellent weekend in golf that I'll touch on to start the podcast with the Players Championship and the winner coming out and having just a fantastic weekend. And then, this week, the NFL is not, we're not going to have an NFL game until September, a real one. But that does not mean that the NFL is going to slow down. They never do. And it's with NFL free agency. I advise you all to check out my podcast that I did yesterday with Adam Beers. We talk about a lot of different free agents. Aaron Jones is a guy we talked about as a potential guy. I'll mention him in this podcast where he ultimately re-signed with the Green Bay Packers, but a lot more names out there. Kenny Golladay, Juju Smith-Schuster. A lot of guys that will be on the move this week, including Mitchell Trubisky leaving the Chicago Bears. What does Jameis Winston do? What does New England do to upgrade their roster? So with free agency opening tomorrow, we have seen some signings, and those signings are players that have been released. If you're released from a contract, you're free to sign with teams before free agency. We saw Kevin Zeitler, the former guard for the Giants and Browns, sign with the Baltimore Ravens this morning. So a lot happening in the NFL and around the world of sports, including the NBA as well. And something I'm really excited about that starts Friday that I'll get into later is March Madness. A great weekend for college basketball with tournament games, and but that's all starts Friday, so I'll get into that as well. So as you can tell, a lot happening, and I thought I'd start off by talking about the Players Championship. The Players is one of the bigger non-major tournaments of the year. It's down in Jacksonville, Florida. Really unique course. If you watched any of the golf, you look at the 17th hole, and it's basically, this little divot, this little island, and it carves some players up. At one point on Thursday, 3 guys went through it, and they shot a combined 29 over on the one hole. It can be a disaster. You saw yesterday, Brendan Todd on 17, he just hit the ball completely the wrong way, went into the water. It was a nightmare hole for a lot of guys, but the course is beautiful. It's tricky, but fantastic to watch just on TV. And, there were a lot of spectators there too. So that was good to see in our era of COVID here. But, heading into the tournament, there's a lot of big names that, got a lot of publicity. You had Rory McIlroy, who was starting to play well, ultimately didn't make the cut. You had Patrick Reed, who was a favorite, did not make the cut. Colin Morikawa just barely made the cut and really wasn't involved in the weekend. But at the top of the leaderboard coming into the weekend was Lee Westwood and Bryson DeChambeau. And funny enough, they finished 1-2 last weekend with DeChambeau beating Westwood by a stroke. And Lee Westwood, he's a former world number 1, but he's in his late 40s. You don't expect to see a guy really have this resurgence this late in his career, but he's playing fantastic golf, putting really well, and he just seems really confident. But the tournament really got interesting Saturday because we saw some guys post some really low scores. And it starts with our eventual winner in Justin Thomas. Justin Thomas, he's really thin, he looks like a frail guy, but he doesn't bomb it off the tee, but he hits it a good ways, and his second shot is really his iron play. So it separates him from other golfers. His second shot, he can put, between 6 to 8 feet from the hole, and he gets a really good chance to birdie and, eagle a lot of different holes. And we saw that yesterday. He shoots a 64 on Saturday, fantastic day, puts himself 3 shots off the lead heading into Saturday. And he ultimately won the tournament based on his good play, but also mistakes from Westwood and DeChambeau. Lee Westwood came into the day 13 under. DeChambeau was at 11 under. DeChambeau's tournament really ended on the 4th hole. He hit it off the tee, got stuck in a divot, went in the water. Then he hit it, had to take a drop. Next swing, puts it in the woods, had to take another drop. So he double bogeys that hole. that knocks him out of it. Westwood has a couple holes where he bogeys, and he did recover, but Justin Thomas went 4 under for the day. And the shot of the tournament is on 11. It's a par 5, and Thomas makes eagle. You can watch the video where he kind of does this little thing where his club, where he a little mini fist pump with the putter. That put him at 13 under. He did birdie the next hole. But, I look at that eagle, and that really changed the tournament. Westwood made it interesting because he birdied 18. He ultimately lost by a stroke. But, Justin Thomas, when he's on his game, he's a former major champion. He's one of the best in the world. And I think this is a big win for him because we do have Augusta National in a couple of weeks. He's definitely a guy that can win that tournament. He's played there before. The big thing at Augusta is you need to play it. There's not a lot of guys who come in there, play it the first time, and have sustained success. Maybe you have 1 or 2 good days, but to put 4 good rounds together at Augusta National, you need that experience. Justin Thomas has that. A guy who's had a ton of success early in the season, he leads the FedEx Cup in standings, is DeChambeau. I don't see DeChambeau being a real factor at Augusta National, because it's not about, driving the ball as far as you can. Keeping it out of the rough is critical at the Masters. And Justin Thomas does that. An interesting point yesterday on 18, Thomas hits the ball to his left, and he's lucky that ball did not go in the water. I honestly think, you can look at the gods or whatever, just fate of sports. They wanted Justin Thomas to win this tournament because that ball, I think any other player that's going over, he was a couple inches away from going into the drink. He's definitely losing a stroke. It's going to a playoff for sure. Maybe Westwood wins the tournament. But ultimately he gets the win. Yesterday, Westwood goes even. DeChambeau finishes 1 under for the day. Below him, Brian Harmon had a good day. He went 3 under, make it interesting. But looking at the golf season so far, I think the best players so far this golf season were in March. I look at the start of January. I think you have to put DeChambeau 1. He won last weekend at the Arnold Palmer, finishes 3rd here. He has another top 5 finish. He's playing some really consistent golf. You look at Dustin Johnson. I look at Rory McIlroy. These guys aren't in contention week in, week out. DeChambeau is, for all the notoriety and for people that really don't like him because he's different, he's a consistent golfer. He's finished 2 strokes off the lead here. And, he's still very intriguing because you either love him or you hate him. And, that's great for golf. Justin Thomas is a likable figure. He's a friend with Tiger Woods. So I think that's a good story. Lee Westwood have to be right up there with some of the best golfers this year, finishing 2nd in back-to-back events, and both really tough courses for that matter. So kudos to him at a late age to make a push like this and to keep himself competitive. Matthew Fitzpatrick is another guy. He's not a big name, but he's really consistent. He's always involved in tournaments. He's going to win one here one of these days because he's just always there. But another good tournament. We got, this next tournament, I think a lot of the big names will take some time off just because, they've been playing a lot of golf, but there is a match play event in the weekend of the 28th of March. I suspect we'll see a lot of big name players play there, then take a week off, then they can go play Augusta. So I suspect we'll see the big names get out there at least one more time. They like to play a week or so before the Masters just to get them a little warm up in and improve their game. It'll be interesting to see if Brooks Koepka plays an event before the Masters. He did not play this weekend. He was out with a knee injury. I don't think it'll keep him out of Augusta, but he did have his injury plagued season last year. He had surgery on the knee and it's already bothering him. So that's obviously a cause for concern. But no, I mean, every Thursday it's fun because you get to see new names. It's a new leaderboard, and this golf season has not failed. Every Sunday, the leaderboard's in flux. Guys are making pushes. I mean, we saw Corey Connors yesterday shoot 6 under, led the day, and he finished, -10 after being, having not a very good Saturday. So a good couple weeks for Corey Connors too, a Canadian. He's another guy that would put up there probably in the top 10 best players so far this golf season. And, we're obviously on the push to the Masters. It's the 15th of March today. It starts on the 8th, I believe. So it's coming up a couple weeks, but few more tournaments. Good practice for guys, and these smaller tournaments could be a possible entryway into the Masters. So there's still a lot to play for, whether there's a tournament or whether it's a big Masters type event or not. So good showing this weekend from Justin Thomas. A good surge, and when he gets going with that putter, he can beat anybody in the world. So he's been at number one at one point. I wouldn't be surprised to see it again. And again, Dustin Johnson won the Masters in November. Will be a favorite for sure, but Justin Thomas can't be far behind him with the odds makers to win that event. The hockey weekend, it was interesting. I'll start just broad strokes by talking about two of the hottest teams in the NHL right now. We got the New York Islanders and the Carolina Hurricanes. The Islanders have won 11 of the last 12. They're playing fantastic hockey. And, they lose their captain, Anders Lee. He's going to be out for the remainder of the regular season. He's put on long-term injured reserve. Interestingly enough, he's $7 million against the cap. So he's on long-term IR. He cannot play for the rest of the regular season. However, at the trade deadline, the Islanders can use his $7 million to acquire a player, meaning they could acquire another $7 million player, add him to that roster. Once the playoff starts, the cap's over. So Anders Lee could be reinstated to the roster. You get another $7 million player. The team's that much better. It's a cap loophole, but it's how it works. It's in the CBA. I have no problem with it. I think it's just better teams figure out how to do it. I think a lot of people, they look at Tampa Bay this year. Kucherov's on long-term IR. Again, he had hip surgery. He's not on there because he doesn't want to play, just to make that clear to everybody listening. He goes on long-term IR. He had hip surgery. He's out for the whole regular season. He's supposed to be back come playoff time. So Tampa can use his money to add a roster player, make it work. They made it work with Cirelli and a few other guys. So, they could possibly do the same thing. But, the Islanders lose their captain, but they get, they play New Jersey twice over the weekend. So it's not the toughest competition, but they find a way to win. And, it's Anders Lee out, but they have guys that step up. Kiefer Bellows, son of Brian Bellows, really with a great showing this weekend. 3 goals in a pair of games, including the game winner on Saturday night. You probably know the name because you saw him at the World Junior Hockey Championship. Really a kid with a great shot. He can be physical. I like his game a lot. I think he can, if he's still working in becoming an everyday NHLer, but he stepped up. You got guys like Jordan Eberle on that roster, a veteran like him. Oliver Wahlstrom's another American kid that's played for the World Junior U.S. National Development Program and the U.S. World Junior team. He gets the gimmick winner last night against the Devils, and they win. So, for the Islanders, twofold. They play the system hard. They get production from all parts of their lineup. Matt Martin, Kyle Clutterbuck, Casey Zizekas, all had at least 2 goals this past week, which is impressive. Semyon Varlamov is playing the best hockey of his life. And even Ilya Sorokin, after a tough start, has found his way. He's starting to be a consistent goaltender. And they just find ways to step up. Before the game last night, Noah Dobson and Jean-Gabriel Pageau were put on the COVID list, and they insert Sebastian Aho, and, he gets a point on the opening goal. I mean, it's just about next man up mentality in New York. And I think we see a lot of teams, bitch and complain when they get one injury and it's, oh, poor me. The Islanders are not about that. Barry Trotz builds a team to win. And that's what he's done in Long Island, where he's got young kids, he's got decent veterans, but they just plug and play and they find ways to win. Their bottom of their lineup gives them something. You look at a team like Boston, who's really hit the skids right now. They don't get that. David Krejci, Jake DeBrusk, Sean Corrali, Chris Wagner, they're not giving Boston anything. The Islanders and the other hottest team in the NHL, Carolina Hurricanes, who have won 8 in a row, they get production everywhere from their defense core, from the bottom of their lineup. We've seen this week Morgan Geekie. He was inserted in the lineup for Carolina. Again, if the name doesn't sound familiar, I don't blame you. Yet he scores a pair of goals in a game this week. You got Sean Morant scores a goal for this week for Carolina. I mean, it's impressive what they do. Nito Niederreiter, Dougie Hamilton scores a goal last night. So these teams, it's all about really good defensive structure. That's how I would start looking at these teams. Good goaltending too. Carolina's been without Mrazek, who's really been their starter for the past year and change. But Alex Nedeljkovic and James Reimer have played well. But you also have really good defense with Slavin, with Hamilton, with Brett Pesce. And they've gotten such good defense. They were able, they threw Jay Gardner on waivers yesterday. So these two teams, they're not sexy picks. They're not teams that you're like, oh, I crave to watch that team. But it's something that I think you're going to see. These teams that are not, quote unquote sexy, not fun to watch, but they win. So who cares? This is for Carolina. I think they're playing in it. They played Detroit last night, so that's not an impressive win, but they've beaten Tampa Bay. They've beaten Florida multiple times this year. They're not in a cakewalk division, and the Islanders are in the toughest division in hockey, and they're in first place. They're beating the Bostons, they're beating Pittsburgh, they're ahead of Philadelphia, ahead of Washington right now. That's no small feat. That's an impressive feat for them to be in this position at this point, especially after a lackluster start where we saw some players, Jordan Eberle in particular, struggle out of the gate. So, I just think it's important to point out these two teams and what they're doing. The Islanders have Washington tomorrow night. That's an intriguing matchup. Washington's going to be coming off a back-to-back. They're in Buffalo tonight. But, Washington's 4 points back of the Islanders with 2 games in hand. And, Washington's won 4 in a row since Tom Wilson's suspension. They have not dropped a game yet. But, these two teams are at the top of the division. I think that can change. I had the Islanders missing the playoffs. But kudos to them to just outwork their opponents and play the system that Barry Trotz wants them to play. And, I'll touch on Calgary later. But that's how Calgary's going to have to play. That's if they're going to win games consistently, that's how they're going to do it, by being likes of the Islanders teams that are boring and nobody will want to watch them. But I'm sure if Daryl Sutter's on the bench when his team gets a win, he doesn't care. Barry Trotz is sitting there saying, I could give a rat's ass what Joe from Rexton thinks about the Islanders team and how boring they are to play or how they are to watch. Who cares? If you get the 2 points, Bob's your uncle. Good enough. Like, on to Cincinnati. And, these two teams just find a way to do it. You got the Islanders and Carolina are both in the top 3 for points league-wide with teams, just team points percentage and overall standing. So, they're tops in their divisions right now. Carolina's above Tampa Bay. Islanders are above Washington, Boston, the list goes on. So kudos to these teams. I think I like Carolina longer term with their team. I just think Islanders are going to run into a tough division. If Washington gets hot, if Boston finds their game, I think it'll be harder in the playoffs for the Islanders to beat those teams. They just don't have that elite scoring that, Bergeron, Pasternak, those type players have, Ovechkin. So, but Carolina, if they go with series against Florida, I think it's a tight series, but I think they'll win it. They got some game breakers that they could use. And an interesting story to follow in Carolina, Rob Brendamore is in the last year of his contract. He does not have a new contract yet. The owner in Carolina, he's got his own budget, and I don't think he's going to break that for Rob Brendamore. But if Rob Brendamore somehow leaves Carolina, he'll be sought after heavily. I mean, he's gotten his team to a conference final. He's done a lot. He's done a lot with this team with, mediocre to low amounts of talent. And a guy to watch out for a player in that situation is Seattle, the expansion team. Who's the GM of the expansion team? Ron Francis. Who did Ron Francis hire? It's a Carolina head coach, Rob Brendamore. Just something to keep an eye on down the line. I'm sure they'll want to keep him. I don't think he'll want to leave Carolina, but there's a storyline last week in the podcast. You're worth what someone's willing to pay you. If Seattle throws a bunch of money at Rob Brendamore and says, please, we want you to be our expansion coach, build this from the ground up, it wouldn't surprise me to see Rob Brendamore take a new opportunity and maybe just get some love where he's not getting it in Carolina right now. Another name to watch for that in Seattle for me is Rick Tocchet. He's Arizona head coach right now, but he's in the last year of his deal, and they're a mess. If I was Rick Tocchet, I would not want to re-sign there. Go to Seattle, stable ownership group, really good general manager, and build a program that you have a say in. So a couple names to watch for Seattle. That's obviously going to be this summer, but it's going to be quick. It's going to be here before you know it, because the season's less than 2 months away, the regular season from being over, and Seattle will be picking players in the expansion draft in early July. So just something to keep an eye on as we move forward here. Pivoting to the Canadian division, the Toronto Maple Leafs have been in first place in this division really since from the jump. Montreal was in first briefly because they had some early season success. That dipped off, obviously, where they fired Claude Julien, replaced him Dominic Ducharme. And, Toronto's been a really consistent team. But they've dropped 4 of their last 5. I think this week they played Winnipeg 3 times. They lose twice. The first 2 games, Tuesday, Thursday, I think it's fair to say Toronto was the better team in both games. Tuesday, I think the game was closer. Thursday night, Toronto could have won that one, 8-2. I think they were just all over the puck. They were fast. They were hungry for pucks, and it was an impressive win. But looking at the game Saturday night and last night with the ugly loss to Ottawa, Toronto chased the game. Saturday night, you could say Tuesday, Thursday, it was all Toronto. Saturday night was Winnipeg's game. And I look at a couple key things for Winnipeg. The third line is going to be a third line in hockey in the playoffs can be really important. If you think of cup winning teams, you had your Jeff Carters, you had your that 70s line with Carter Toffoli, Carter Toffoli and Tanner Pearson, but you had the Dustin Brown below that. You had that line that was clicking. The Dwight King inserted. You had Adrian Kempe producing. Then you had Chicago with the likes of Bickle and Boland and Ladd. And that obviously changed throughout with Vermette and Marcus Kruger. And it's an important line. It's not your top 6, but they can play a defensive role or they can chip in offensively, which can create, cup winning organizations. I look at Winnipeg's third line. In the middle, you got that horse named Adam Lowry. The guy's a stud. He's a big center. He can win draws, and he puts up points. Saturday night, gets 2 assists. You got on his right wing Mason Appleton. The kid's a great competitor. He gets 2 goals in the 3-game set with Toronto. He's not afraid to get his nose dirty. Gets to the net. He's actually got some good hands as well. And then they kind of throw in a different player all the time. You got Jansen Harkins, who's played. You got guys like Trevor Lewis who can chip in on that line. But this line is special. I've seen Ehlers take shifts. But the third line in Winnipeg, it won them this game. And, when they matched up against Tavares, Nylander, and Kerfoot, it really was a no contest. They had the puck. They wore Toronto down, and Lowry against Tavares, again, Lowry won that matchup, and that's got to concern Leafs fans. We've seen glimpses of John Tavares being a really elite player this year, but the problem is there's been glimpses. It hasn't been a consistent theme where you night in, night out, you say, wow, John Tavares looked really good tonight. And if you are, I think you need to get a new TV. I think William Nylander's played well recently, but Tavares has been a guy that's been lacking all year. And I look at this game and I say, Toronto chased the game. Have they played a lot of puck lately? Yes. But every team's playing a lot. That's not an excuse. And, Toronto got a Saturday night where you get a backup goalie. I mean, Laurent Brossoit started, not Connor Hellebuck. And, Brossoit was looking at his pads the whole game, complaining about the laces, and Toronto still couldn't win. A couple things for Toronto. I think Justin Hall's kind of hit the ditch a little bit lately. He's played some really good hockey this year. Concerns me a little bit. I think he's played pretty horrible in the last 4 or 5 games, making some just really bad decisions. I think he'll turn it around, but that's bound to happen. He's a guy who barely, made a name for himself in the league, and then now he's being asked to play a shutdown role. Bad things are going to happen. So I suspect he'll turn it around, but he's struggled lately. Again, it's like beating a dead horse on this podcast, but Travis Dermott. Toronto traded away Mikko Lehtinen on Friday, and he's really their depth defenseman if there was an injury. Rasmus Sandin's out, so that's not an option right now. Dermott, I think Sheldon Keefe feels comfortable with his top 6. I would not feel comfortable with my top 6 because of Dermott. If I had a better option at the 6th defenseman, I'd be fine with their defense core. Do I think they can improve it? Yes, but I'd be fine with it. Dermott, he's a liability. In his own zone, he's going to turn over the puck. He's not going to make a right decision. He gets caught pinching a ton, which he should never do because he's not a good enough defenseman to take those risks. As a 6th defenseman, you need to know your place, and that's what he is. Bogosian's ahead of him in the depth chart, and that's pretty clear. But I look at the game, and it wasn't the Scheifele, Connor, Ehlers, the game breakers that that Winnipeg has that won this game. It was that third line that really just outworked Toronto. And, I think Toronto has X factors like that. Zach Hyman comes to mind. I think Hyman and Lowry are similar in that they're both not afraid to go in the corner to get the puck. They're workhorses and they're team first guys where they're not afraid to do what it takes to win. But I think Winnipeg has a few more of those guys than Toronto does. And that worries me a little bit. You got a guy like Kerfoot's way better on the wing. I think Sheldon Keefe made a good decision moving him to the wing. He needs to stay there. He's not a center. If it was Lowry against Kerfoot in a playoff series, if that was the matchup, it's over. Lowry will eat Kerfoot. He'll take his lunch money, then give him a swirly and, throw him out for the other kids to beat his ass. I mean, it's just point blank. They need to keep Kerfoot on the wing. I think you look at Engvall, Hyman, and the other Mikheyev. It's a good line. Engvall has played a cup of coffee in the NHL. I would not want to have him as the third line center going into the playoffs. I don't think he's earned enough yet. So you got to look at that position. And then, left wing is another area where Toronto needs to look. You got Hyman, who's fantastic, but you got Kerfoot playing the wing right now, but where does Jumbo fit in? If he's not going to play a third line checking role because he's not fast enough to keep up and play that role. Is he on the 4th line? Who's playing with Matthews and Marner? Is it going to be Hyman consistently? I think it should be, but that affects your third line. So I still think Toronto's playing great. Last night, they chased the game again. They lost to Ottawa. It's not a team you want to lose to. They seem to have a lot of trouble playing Ottawa. Obviously, a couple goals from Drake Batherson. Tim Stützle with a beautiful cross-ice pass on the power play. Toronto made it interesting late when Hyman and Nylander both scored in the third period. But ultimately, it's empty calories because they don't come back and get any points. So they're off till Friday. I think this is an interesting couple days because not playing till Friday, maybe it's time for Dubas to look at making a trade. You make a move. You start the quarantine period. They play Friday, Saturday, but then they don't play again until Thursday. So I think with the trade deadline on April 12th, I think it's time to do business for these teams. And for Toronto and for Winnipeg, they're both teams that need to do stuff. For Winnipeg, for me to see Winnipeg as a real cup contender, they need a top 4 defenseman. For me, that's David Savard. And if I'm Toronto, I want David Savard for 2 reasons. He makes me a real cup contender, really good player. Also, I don't want Winnipeg to get him. That's half of the battle there. I do not want Winnipeg getting David Savard, because you get Morrissey, you get Pionk, you get Savard, you get Tucker Poolman. Your D don't look so bad. They could still use another guy to their D core other than just Savard. But Savard would be an intriguing ad for either team here. Toronto, you're going to have to make the money work, but late in the season, a lot of that money's already off. So believe me, trading a Kerfoot for David Savard is not going to kill your organization. If you have to put Kerfoot overboard, if any Leaf fans crying over that, over him leaving, believe me, that's not that big of a loss. But an intriguing guy for both teams. I think this is the most intriguing matchup if they do meet in the playoffs. I think they're similarly built. Obviously, Toronto's never going to be that intriguing of a playoff team to watch, in my opinion, because they don't really play a physical game. Maybe they'll change, but they haven't in the past 3-4 years. Winnipeg will. So I'll be interested to see how Toronto reacts to that if and when they play in the postseason. So it's something to keep an eye on. A couple observations from that game. The Calgary Flames, 2-0 since Daryl Sutter's taken over, winning 2-1 Thursday, 3-1 Saturday over the Montreal Canadiens. And a couple of things you notice from both games. Really strong defensive structure. I mentioned the Islanders earlier. They're not that fun to watch. They're boring. They muck it up. And Calgary's going to do the same thing, and Daryl Sutter's going to be smiling the whole time while they're doing it. He does not care. He's brought in here to win games, and clearly what they were doing before was not working. So he believes that making the game boring, making it quote unquote simple, is what's necessary for Calgary to get some wins here. I like the strategy. You see their power play start to click, but really strong defensive play, not giving Montreal a lot of time and space in the high danger areas, eliminating scoring chances. And, that's something that, Calgary does so well. They make it really tough on opponents, and they have guys that can do it. We've seen Lucic get a bigger role. Sam Bennett can eliminate time and space. Derek Ryans, the Majanapanis. These guys are not meant to be high flyers. And the big thing for me will be, if Johnny Gaudreau's got the chains put on him, how will he react to Daryl Sutter? How is he going to approach this? And, so far it's 2 games. It's been good. But, they got an interesting game tonight because they'll play Edmonton. Edmonton's a team that likes to open it up. They're an interesting team because Edmonton has the likes of McDavid. They've got high flyers, so to speak, on their team. And I'm going to watch some of that game tonight because I want to see how Calgary reacts to being pressed, so to speak, having McDavid, Draisaitl come at you in waves, even Tyson Barrie, Darnell Nurse. These guys on the point, they like to jump up into the play. So how does Daryl get that system put in against a team that flies? Montreal plays similar to Calgary. They don't have a fast-paced team. You think of Gallagher, you think of Philippe Danault, you think of Josh Anderson, who can fly, but they're more of a muck it up type team, get in the corners, see what happens. Edmonton's not like that. Even their bottom of their lineup, they like to get going. They like to get fast break, move it up. And, but this will be the Battle of Alberta, but first time with Daryl Sutter since, 06. So they play 2 times this week. And Calgary's made it interesting. They win 2 against Montreal, both in regulation. They're now 2 points behind them in the standings. They play 5 more times. So that could be it there. I mean, those head-to-head matchups to see who gets the last playoff spot. And for Montreal, the problems still persist. I think, Carey Price has turned his game around. You can't really say, they lose 2-1 Thursday. Jake Allen got the start. Okay. They lose 3-1 Saturday. None of the goals were really that bad on Carey Price, but 2 goals in 2 games is not going to do it. It's not going to win many games. So Montreal still got to find it. They need to find consistent goal scoring from lines. They got to put it in a blender a little bit, see what comes out the other side. You got, one of their top guys right now when it comes to producing offense is Corey Perry. That's not a good thing. He's the worm. He's a 4th line winger. You don't want him to be your top point producer, or things aren't going really well. So Montreal, they got Winnipeg twice this week. That's a tough matchup. They've had their problems with Winnipeg this year. The last matchup, they did win 7-1, which was a little over a week ago. So we'll see what happens for them. But it's starting to get interesting in the Canadian division because you got kind of a couple of battles. You got Winnipeg and Edmonton, 4 points behind Toronto. Then you have Calgary, 2 points behind Montreal, but you still got Montreal with games in hand over Edmonton, so they could maybe catch them. So still a lot to be decided in the Canadian division and, of course, around the NHL. But so far, so good for Daryl Sutter. Dominic Ducharme has been a mixed bag as the new head coach in Montreal. They're still trying to find consistent offense and effort from their group. And they did lose Ben Sherratt over the weekend, too, with a fractured hand. So that's a big loss, obviously being a top 4 defenseman on their club. I'm going to get to the struggles of Philadelphia continuing, but I got to touch on this. The Buffalo Sabres, they've lost 10 in a row, and it's getting ugly down there. You got Jack Eichel, who they say now he's going to be out a week, but it could be a longer period of time. Taylor Hall rumors are swirling around about him being traded. You got Ristolainen. You got Ralph Kruger, whose ass has to be at least halfway on fire right now because I think he's halfway out the door already. But losing 10 in a row, it's an ugly 10. 5 of those games that they've lost, they've scored 2 goals or less. I mean, that's not going to work. I mean, they got Washington tonight, but it's a division where you're not going to, if you're playing the Bostons, you're playing Washington Islanders, you're not going to win many of these games. But I look, Jack Eichel out. I don't see this team going anywhere without a rebuild again. And it's so frustrating because you look at Toronto and Buffalo are really in similar positions. Teams that had decent success in the early 2000s. You got Toronto made the conference final in 2002. You had Buffalo who made conference finals in 2007 and 06 and 07. And, they're playoff teams and perennial cup contender. But Toronto went through a rebuild long period of time. It was, it's well documented that they were a nightmare for a long time. But they've turned it around. They got their Austin Matthews. Obviously, Buffalo did not get Connor McDavid. They tanked for him. They did not win the lottery, but life goes on. They did get Rasmus Dahlin at number 1. They have gotten Sam Reinhart up high. They got Jack Eichel at number 2, but it hasn't worked, and it looks like they're going to have to blow it up again because I can't see Eichel not saying, I want out of here. After another year of just terrible play, he hasn't played well. He's got to own that. I think he's been injured from day one. But again, if you're playing, injury is not really an excuse. I've never played professional sports, but I listen to other pro athletes. And when other pro athletes say, when you take the field, injury is not an excuse. So if you take the field, I've heard multiple guys say that. So that's the position I take because I'm going to learn from others, from guys who have played the game. That's how they look at it. That's how I'm going to take it here as a pundit. So Eichel, okay, you're hurt. Well, if you're that hurt, go sit down and somebody else will play. But if you're on the ice, I got to judge you like I would, your counterparts, the Connor McDavids, the other $10 million type players. Mitch Marner makes 10 and a half. He's been a lot better than Jack Eichel this year. That's looking at that comparison money wise, Mitch Marner has been a much more effective player. But 10 in a row is hard to do, to be that bad. And it doesn't matter what they do the rest of the year when it comes to winning games. I mean, they could lose every game the rest of the year. You look at the worst teams in this league. You got Buffalo, Anaheim has really it's been ugly the past couple of weeks there. And I would put New Jersey, probably the third worst team in the league, right above Ottawa. But Buffalo is going to be picking high in the draft again. And it just seems like it's never ending, this drought in Buffalo. The Pagulas bought the team 9 years ago. They've never made the playoffs as an ownership group. That's hard to do, to be that bad for that. And it can't just be the ownership. I get it, but the Bills were inept for years, and they've owned the Bills for 15 years, and the Bills just finally turned it around. But they hired good people. Sean McDermott, Brandon Beane. I got to look at Buffalo. Ralph Kruger was coaching soccer a year and a half ago. Why was he the head coach that you needed? Kevin Adams, again, he's put in a tough spot because Botterill really screwed him. But Kevin Adams has never been a general manager in the NHL. And now you're throwing him in here with nobody with seniority to really help him out. And you're like, okay, here's a pile of shit. Dig your way out of it. Basically is what happened. He's at his doorstep, and some guy with a loader just comes and dumps a pile of dog shit right in his front lawn. Jeff Skinner. Rasmus Ristolainen, no goaltending. Jack Eichel's contract. The list goes on. And I don't know. It's ugly in Buffalo. And for a team that had no success, I don't even know if you can call it a rebuild again. Because what did you build? You built a house with no foundation. So now, okay, no shit, it's going to fall over. But, you think of a rebuild, Chicago, they could go through a rebuild because they won 3 cups. That's not failure. You're going through a rebuild because you had so much success that you couldn't draft high. You couldn't stock up prospects. Buffalo, you built something. It's like a 2-year-old building a sandcastle. It's going to fall. That's basically what happened in Buffalo. I'm going to have to think of a concept, a different name for it, because I can't call it a rebuild. Rebuilds are for teams that have at least a little bit of success. The Rangers did win a cup, but they made it to a cup final in 2014. They got there. So it's just crazy what's happening in Buffalo. Maybe I'll save the Flyers chat for under review tonight. I mean, they still need to learn how to make a save. Elliott, they're starting Brian Elliott in back-to-back starts over Carter Hart. I mean, that's what Alain Vigneault thinks of Carter Hart right now in his game. So something to watch in Philly as they sit 3 points out of a playoff spot right now. Over the weekend, it was, really for me, one of the big focuses was college basketball. On the podcast Wednesday night, myself and Matt Wright are going to do, a tournament preview. Tournament starts Friday afternoon. It usually starts on the Thursday, but they needed an extra day this year for COVID protocols and health and safety for players to travel to Indianapolis because it's going to be basically in a bubble. So they're going to be playing from Indy. So that'll be interesting. But I'll talk about some of the tournament winners in the conference winners, but the big deal here, no Duke, no Kentucky in this tournament. The Blue Bloods, some of these teams that have been in the tournament forever are not going to be here. No North Carolina. It's, Duke and Kentucky, I look at them in college basketball similar to I look at them similar that I look at the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto Maple Leafs are a team that get a lot of publicity, that get a lot of attention, and they never win anything. Kentucky's won 1 national championship in the last 22 years, but yet they're really high elite program, but 1 title with Anthony Davis led Kentucky team. Duke's had Zion Williamson. Duke's had Brandon Ingram. They've had these really great NBA players, but they've won 1. Mike Krzyzewski's been a really elite coach, but he's only won 1 tournament in the last 10 years. So I see they are the Blue Bloods. They're the team that gets the notoriety, no doubt. but they're not a team that, I look at a Gonzaga. Gonzaga is a team out west. You don't watch them a lot because their games start at 11 o'clock at night. But they consistently make it to the Elite Eight or the Final Four on a consistent basis. Duke doesn't. Duke had Zion Williamson, Cam Reddish, Josh Hart. They had an elite team. They didn't even make it to they were out in the Sweet 16 with R.J. Barrett, Williamson, all that talent. They were out in the Sweet 16. Gonzaga, a team that's built, Duke, Kentucky, they're teams that are built on players that they recruit to play 1 year. They play 1 year at Duke and Kentucky, then they go to the NBA. Gonzaga, they recruit players to play 4 years at Gonzaga. This year, they're going to have a one and done named Jalen Suggs, who looks like he's going to be a really good NBA player, but it's rare. They've had 3, Zach Collins, Suggs this year, and I'm missing one, Kelly Olynyk. But other than that, their guys stay there and they become a team. They play 2-3 years together. They might lose the first year in the tournament, but they come back and they're veteran and they know what to do. And they're coming into this tournament. Gonzaga is the number 1 overall seed. The tournament works where there's four different regions, and at the top of each region, there's a number 1 seed. So you got Gonzaga, you got Baylor, you got Michigan, and you got Illinois in the 4 different regions of the number 1 seeds. They play a 16, 2, 15, and the list goes down from there. But, some surprise entrants into this tournament. You got, Georgetown. They play in the Big East. They needed to win the Big East championship to make the tournament. They started out as an 8 seed. They upset Villanova on a game-winning buzzer beater. They battled through the Big East. They upset Creighton in the Big East championship. They're going to the tournament. Head coach Patrick Ewing, obviously playing at Georgetown before he went to the Knicks. Over the weekend, we saw Texas defeat Oklahoma State in a really big upset. Illinois, Ohio State, the Big Ten, which is a football school. You think of Ohio State, you think of Michigan, you think of Wisconsin, even Illinois to a certain extent. It's a football school, right? But the Big Ten has Illinois and Michigan as number 1 seeds, and Ohio State's a 4 seed. The Big Ten is loaded when it comes to college basketball this year. I think they got top 8 teams in the country. 3 of them are from the Big Ten. Illinois obviously has been as good or better than Michigan in the past couple of weeks. Ohio State's a really competitive team. They beat Michigan on Saturday to get to the Big Ten championship game. And I'm going to get more into this with Matt, but this year, there's no, you think of an NBA prospect, and you're like, okay, this guy's going to break open the league. We haven't seen that, but I think this tournament's going to be really, really fun because you're going to see teams that you wouldn't normally expect. I mentioned the Big Ten. In the SEC, Alabama, a football school, they win the SEC championship. They're a sleeper team for me. They might lose in the first game. Could very well happen, but they're a tricky little team. They're good. You got a team like Houston. Houston's another football school, but they're a sneaky team. They could do some damage in this tournament. They're a team that shoots the ball really well, but for me, you think the NBA right now, it's all about shooting threes. It's about stretching the floor. In college basketball right now, the best teams rebound the ball and shoot close jumpers. And the big man, which has really become extinct in the NBA, because if you're a center and you can't shoot threes, nobody wants you. In college basketball right now, if you can get to the hoop, rebound, and put them back in the hoop, you're a luxury. And I think you look at teams like Illinois and Michigan, they have players that can do that. So, all the number 1 seeds look good, but I think this is a wide open tournament. A lot of the regions I'm looking at, they're really wide open, and I'll get more into it in depth on Wednesday night. That'll be Wednesday night, 8:30. Me and Matt are going to go through all the regions, go through our favorite teams, kind of any upsets that we see. And we're going to do this throughout. We're going to do a preview show. Then the first round starts Friday. It goes Friday, Saturday. Second round, Sunday, Monday. We'll do another show likely Wednesday night of next week to preview the Sweet 16 and Elite Eight. Then we'll do another one and then another podcast for the final. So it's a less than a month of action for March Madness this year, but it's always fun. It's one of the best sporting events of the year. Again, it's different because there's gonna be no fans. It's in Indianapolis, but this was the first day. It was a week away from starting last year, and then COVID hit, and to shut down, it was such a shock that COVID. You knew COVID had to have been real. It shut down the March Madness, the NCAA tournament. How much money this brings to the NCAA is astounding. It's in the millions and millions of dollars. And obviously, you're not going to get ticket revenue, but for ESPN, for CBS, for TNT, Turner, for them to have this event on this year, it's a big deal. So I'm glad it's back, and I'm glad I missed it a ton last year in my depression with no sports, and it's good to see these kids get the opportunity to play and do what they love, and ultimately compete for a national championship. NFL, I did the podcast yesterday with Adam. We talked about a lot of different quarterback news, about free agents. And, last night I'm sitting there and I was thinking yesterday, Drew Brees, why isn't Drew Brees retired? It's March 14th. He's had 2 months to retire since getting beat by the Bucs. It just came as a surprise to me. And you're 2 days away from free agency. The rumors are still out there. Obviously, Drew, it's also reported that he's going to go to NBC and work at the desk with, Mike Florio and Chris Sims and, the crew there, Mike Tirico. But finally, last night, Drew Brees comes out in his Instagram, and I think took a video with his kids. I think he's got 4 children, and they all, they helped him say goodbye to the NFL. He's retiring after 20 plus years in the league, Super Bowl champion. And at one point he still is the all-time leader in passing yards. He's second in passing touchdowns, getting passed by Brady this past year. But just looking back on Drew Brees, there's a couple different factors you got to look at. He really was run out of the league. He was in San Diego, now the Los Angeles Chargers, but San Diego Chargers at the time. And he had shoulder surgery, and it was a really bad surgery. They said, Drew, we don't know if you're going to be the same. And the Chargers had him. They drafted him, and I can't really blame them. They gave up on him, and they drafted Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers became one of the best quarterbacks he was their best quarterback in franchise history. Drew's obviously had a better career than Phillip, but for what he did there, great career. But Drew, they let him go. He says, what am I going to do? Miami Dolphins. This has got to kill Dolphins fans. Drew Brees was there. They could have signed him, but they said no. They looked at his medical report and they said, I don't know about Drew Brees long-term. That shoulder's going to be too big of a what if, and we're not comfortable with him being our quarterback of the future. So they let him go. And New Orleans gives him a shot. This was during the time where Hurricane Katrina was really ravaging the city of New Orleans. It brought them to their knees. I'm not going to give a history lesson because I'm not the one to do that. But, if you think back and how devastating Katrina was, I think we can all admit that it changed New Orleans. And a huge part of rebuilding that city, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally, was the New Orleans Saints. And who was the key figure of that? Drew Brees. He took it on the chin. He helped in the community. He did charity work. And he was just a guy that gave them all hope. And they rebuilt the Mercedes-Benz Superdome, which is now one of the most beautiful stadiums in the NFL. And then they go and win the Super Bowl in 2009. Drew Brees and the Saints win the Super Bowl. A huge moment for the city where they could just rejoice. They had something to celebrate. And I think sports oftentimes, it's a kid's game that people do for a living and that I love to watch and I enjoy more than anything on earth. But it brings us together. Looking at COVID, that was really the start of COVID. Rudy Gobert testing positive. It started COVID. For Drew Brees in the city of New Orleans. New Orleans isn't a Super Bowl champion. New Orleans isn't this city where it becomes a football mecca without Drew Brees rebuilding it and helping them do it. And you can look at his career and all the passing yards and everything else, Super Bowl. But what he did for New Orleans will never be forgotten. And he said that yesterday, this is not goodbye, New Orleans. This is not the last chapter. Obviously, he's going to have roots there forever. But, the guy is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He overcoming that injury, doing what he did, being a guy who was only 6 feet tall. He had a lot of obstacles he had to overcome. And I think for quarterbacks, for just different athletes, look at Drew Brees. He was never supposed to be successful, but he was. And he battled and he did not give up on himself. And for Tom Brady to tweet out, "Congratulations, my friend, on an incredible career," it's respect there, because Brady was a 6th-round pick. He had to earn it. Drew Brees was a cast-off from San Diego. Miami wouldn't take him. Denver didn't want him. So he goes to New Orleans and makes a career when he was not supposed to have one. And, it ends the speculation in New Orleans, if he was going to come back. I was starting to think maybe he was, but he retires after a lengthy career. And, it looks, they did restructure Taysom Hill's contract so that, he's making around $10 million this year. He is a quarterback, but he also plays some running back, tight end. So I still think they can make some moves at the quarterback position. But he's been that stable guy for generations. And now they're like New England. They have to look at the future. Drew Brees is gone. Is Taysom Hill the guy? Is Jameis Winston what they're looking for? Can they make a bigger play here? Can they acquire Russell Wilson? But a great career for Drew Brees. Be interesting to watch what Sean Payton and the New Orleans Saints do during free agency and how they approach the quarterback position. But, kudos to Drew Brees. Fantastic career, great competitor, and a really admirable, guy for what he did during his career for New Orleans and everything in between. So nothing but respect to him, and good luck at NBC. And hopefully he's better than Jason Witten is at his first crack at doing commentary and punditry. And, I also mentioned at the top of the podcast, Aaron Jones. I talked to him yesterday with Adam. I was surprised that Green Bay did not franchise tag him, but clearly they wanted him on a longer-term deal. Yesterday it was announced that they've signed him to a 4-year, $48 million deal, including a $13 million signing bonus. He's been a really productive back for them. He's been, him and Aaron Rodgers have been a good tandem. They do have A.J. Dillon, who they drafted the 4th round out of Boston College. They still have Jonathan Williams. But, I don't love the contract because giving running backs a second contract is difficult. And they can if they get injured, they've taken a lot of hits, and Aaron Jones has played a lot of football. But I understand it from Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers is not a spring chicken. They need to try to win a Super Bowl here in the next year or so. And Aaron Jones gives them a better chance to do that than just having Jamal Williams and A.J. Dillon in your backfield. And I'm sure this is a move to appease Aaron too. He's got a good relationship with Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones has been a productive guy with Aaron under center in the pass game and in the running game. So a good move, but I just look at the 4-year, $48 million. It can be a hindrance. We've seen Todd Gurley. We've seen Ezekiel Elliott, where their second contract, it's tough for them to be productive because they've taken so many licks, taken a lot of hits, and it can really affect their game long term. But good for Aaron Jones. He's earned a second contract. Just for running backs, it can be tough to get them, or tough for it to look good after a few games, after a few years, because of all the hits and all the type of licks they've taken over the years. But really interesting weekend in sports. It always seems to be lately. I'm going to be doing Under Review tonight with Craig on Facebook at 8 p.m. So you can join us there. We'll be talking about a number of different things, including his Boston Bruins really struggling lately. But like I said, this week I got show with Seamus tomorrow night. We'll be recapping episodes 5 and 6 of Sharp Objects. I'll be doing a podcast Wednesday night with Matt Wright. We'll talk about March Madness, preview the tournament for you. A couple shows by myself this week, like this one this morning. And then Friday, I'm going to be doing a podcast with the better half of the Warren children, Tally, my sister. I've never had her on yet, but she's in isolation. And I kind of want to talk to her about just playing defense, the position right now, what it's like to kind of be a defensive defenseman on a team, how she approaches the game, how her kind of life in hockey, how she grew to love the game. And this will be a little bit question answer, also a little bit of a just talk like I do with other guests that I have had, but I'm looking forward to it. Obviously it's nice to get a family on the show, and it's obviously nice to get to see her a little bit just virtually before she gets out of isolation next weekend. So look forward to that. A lot more coming here onto the point. Leave your comments. I read them all. I get back to them. So if you have any ideas, if you want to be a guest, any potential sports you want to hear about, again, I'm going to get into baseball. I know some people have told me to talk some baseball. I'm going to. Just with spring training, it's really hard to get, there's not a lot of games on TV. And quite frankly, I don't care about exhibition sports. When the games start, I'm over it. And, April 1st is MLB opening day. I'm going to start talking about MLB. That's going to be in the rotation. Don't you worry about it. And I'll do a preview show and everything too. But as we get close to the season, we'll talk more, but just preseasons and spring training's a drag. So we will get there. It's a slow burn, but we will get there, I promise. So baseball will be a part of the rotation sooner than you think. But no, great show today. Hope you guys all had a great weekend. Have a great week. And I'll be back on lots this week, so be hearing from me. But until then, stay safe and take care.